I wonder if you're familiar with what's called the old traditional English Book of Common Prayer, 1662. There's something called a catechism, which was what young people were meant to learn before they became full members of the church. And one of the questions was what about the rituals of the church? And the answer was they're all outward and visible signs of inward and spiritual grace. Outward and visible signs of inward and spiritual grace. It's worth remembering that, at least I find it is. Because human tendency is always to go into the outward and visible. That's where we feel comfortable. Normally, this is what we call reality, the outward and visible, which is really a sign of what is inward and spiritual. And the whole work is towards rediscovering the inward and spiritual origin of what is manifests as the outward and visible evidence out there in the world. And so, not surprisingly, in man's interpretation of spirit, the churches are packed with outward and visible signs of inward and spiritual grace. For example, the communion service, baptism, or everything that takes place is largely outward and visible signs of what is inward and spiritual. It was rather nice, actually, as we left the church yesterday evening, that woman, Judith, who likes to sing and play the piano, I thought was one of those people that didn't like me, but actually I spoke to her a few weeks ago and we suddenly made friends and discovered that it's not that we don't like each other at all, we just sort of have never spoken before. And she immediately started saying nice things about us who had been sitting in silence, and now she's going to have a service which of course is full of singing and music and noise. And so we laughed about this and had a sort of understanding that, as I said, it's like two wings of a bird. One is the noisy wing, the one that goes flap, 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 and the other is the silent one. You know, it's not that they're contradictory; they're just sort of, like that. The outward and visible, and the inward and spiritual. You can say the whole world. You see, the whole world that we see and can feel is the outward and visible signs of, as we said yesterday, that invisible spiritual substance. Here it is, we're sitting in it now like fishes in the sea. Here is I suppose you could say that fishes themselves are outward and visible, they're sort of crystallizations of the water that they live in, aren't they? So we are the outward and visible side of the inward and spiritual substance that we call spirit. So, yes, sin is naturally, in common understanding, sin has come to mean, don't do this, don't do that, and in other words, Old Testament stuff. Whereas the inward and spiritual is more the New Testament stuff. That's really what it's all about. And, again, what happens, organizations that lose that sense of the spiritual get hooked on the outward and visible and say, well, that's it, that's reality, that's what matters. Another word for spirit, which is very useful, is the causal world, you see. You can really substitute the word causal for spirit, largely. It's the causal world. It's where things begin. You can think of God as the original cause. It's where it all starts. The causal world. First cause. Cause and effect. We live in a world of effects. We try to change the world by manipulating effects, one against the other. But we've got to come back to the cause. Some people get the idea when they think of preventative rather than curative medicine, don't they? You've got to come back to the cause. Why do things go wrong? Why is the world in this predicament it is now? Why? What's the cause of it all? You won't cure the world by abolishing plastic. You've got to come back to the cause. And then the extraordinary thing is that once we stop, the less we try to control things, see. The miracle is that things happen naturally, don't they? The listening functions, doesn't it? The clock ticks. Spring's on the way. Doesn't Jesus say, take no thought for the morrow, but seek ye first the kingdom of God, which is this, of course, and then everything is added to you, everything is provided. Well, it's easier said than done, isn't it? But you can get the gist of it. It's extraordinary, isn't it? Your body still functions, your digestion happens, your blood, your breathing, your eyes blink. You don't have to do anything, do you? It all just happens, your hair grows. How does it happen? Let alone the world. River goes on running, doesn't it? We begin to understand that the only problem in the world is me. That's what gets in the way, isn't it? I am the great obstacle. I think that's why mantras are often favoured as a means of meditation, because listening to a sound is well, I won't compare different mantras. There are many ways of meditating, but there are endless layers of subtlety to listening. You can listen to the gross outer sounds, but the more you listen, then you sort of sink into deeper and deeper listening, don't you? So the mantra can correspondingly become subtler and subtler and subtler, deeper and deeper and deeper, ad infinitum. We talk of the voice of God, don't we? Rather naively, we try to translate that into words, don't we? But obviously there's something much deeper than that. This classic icon from Russia was given to me many years ago when I was in Russia. And I very, very often studied it since. Because so often in the West, representations of St. George show him as a muscular soldier saint with a military weapon, slaying the dragon and even blood flowing. Whereas in contrast, this icon, and also with big muscles, in contrast, this icon is completely devoid of all aggression. In fact, St. George's face is in total peace, serene. And the spear is really a shaft of light. It's so fine, it's like a gossamer thread, almost nothing. And the horse itself just dances over the dragon without any impact, like a horse of light. And his whole demeanour is that of peace. Completely no judgment or criticism. It is just to see them and realise it's just a shadow. There's no harm in a shadow, is there? A shadow is just away from the light. And what causes shadows anyway? Look, when I turn away from that light, my face is in shadow, isn't it? So I am the cause of the shadow, aren't I? When I turn back, where's the shadow? It's not seen, is it? Exactly. So the powers of darkness, that's all they are. So here you are. There's no need to fight them. One simply turns back to the light. And of course, here's the eye of God looking down. And there's the invisible hand to hold, the invisible friend to guide us. And put our trust in that. And then you don't hardly notice the powers of darkness. All we need to do is just see them. Look, that's just shadow. So there we are. It's the commandment of Jesus from the Sermon on the Mount, you see, resist not evil. Because when we don't resist evil, it simply diminishes. But when you turn towards evil, what happens? It magnifies. We give it consciousness. You feed it with awareness. And that, of course, makes it get bigger. The moment you say something's awful, it gets bigger, doesn't it? It grows. You look at it and smile. It's less. All we have to do is try when we remember to put it into practice. Then all that we've been talking about this last 3 days becomes practical and real. We will forget, of course we will. We'll forget 5 minutes after we leave this room, but then we'll remember again. Try to remember.